They took America to the moon.
One small step for man.
And safely back again.
We show you on the base, it really looks great.
They showed the world what a team can do.
We felt it essential to our nation to remain explorers.
And brought us into the next century.
That's how we find things that end up changing humanity.
They are the engineers of NASA's Mission Control who carry on the dream of space.
We thought our work would go on forever.
After reaching the moon, Gene Kranz and Mission Control face even greater challenges.
Congress pulled the plug. KGB was always present.
Hang on.
The two of us went ass over tea kettle into outer space.
It seemed like time froze. Everything stopped.
I knew instantly something was really wrong.
We had lost the crew.
It is not easy. It will never be easy.
Sometimes you're going to have to walk through a wall of fire to get there.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
Okay, all flight controllers, gonna go for powered descent. Retro, go. Fido, go. Guide, go. Control, go. Capcom word, go for powered descent.
July 20th, 1969. Apollo 11. The first moon landing.
Contact light. Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
400,000 people, 20,000 companies and universities, 8 years of work, and $25 billion have made good on President John Kennedy's 1961 vision. Project Apollo lives forever as a great American triumph, a clear goal, defined and met. Flight director for the Apollo 11 landing, the man in charge in Mission Control, is Gene Kranz.
During Apollo, we had this challenge that we had been issued by President Kennedy to land on the moon and to bring this crew back home. We were fighting for the hearts and minds of the people of the free world. So we knew what the goal was, what the objective was.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Giant leap for mankind.
With Kennedy's challenge met, what should come next? Where should America go beyond the moon? How much are we willing to spend on space and to risk? Today, the questions that arose in 1969 are still being debated. Nearly half a century after reaching the moon, NASA is at a crossroads, searching for a vision it hasn't had since Apollo.
It takes more than rocket engines and computers and hardware and high-temperature materials to go to the moon. The thing that made it all hang together was leadership and the will of the country to be behind us and be patient enough to allow us to do it. We haven't had that since.
The EVA is progressing beautifully.
One of the things that I think always drove the space program, still does to a certain extent, is a threat. Anytime there's been a threat to our supremacy and technology and that sort of thing, we've responded to it.
They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes.
After July 20th, 1969, the threat of a Russian moon is gone. But most Apollo engineers assume humanity's voyage off our planet has just begun.
We had a notion that within 20 years we would be landing men on Mars. Now, it didn't turn out that way, because we didn't get the promised money, the budget support that we were promised by the Nixon administration.
We were mired in Vietnam, and there were tremendous social protests against that, and that had to be the first priority of the administration. So the Nixon administration greatly reduced the NASA budget.
After Apollo, NASA has proposed building a space station, a shuttle, a moon base, and manned missions to Mars. All are canceled, except the future shuttle, which passes Congress by a single vote. Even the last Apollo flights are cut.
This was really bitter wine. I just felt that this nation was abandoning this moon and this program that we had paid such a heavy price for. It was not only the crew paid the price, the controllers paid the price, the nation paid the price.
They tore everything down. The lunar receiving lab, all the good stuff we had. They just ripped it up and threw it away. I just can't believe the country did that, and I don't forgive them, ever.
With Apollo canceled and the future space shuttle years away, NASA puts together the only mission it can afford. SkyLab, a prototype space station built from leftover Apollo parts. Though NASA's future has been cut back, to Gene Kranz, SkyLab and every mission to come is critical. America must continue in space.
I always looked at it in a much even broader sense than the Cold War. I looked at it as the nature of explorers. I looked at it as the spirit of our nation. I looked at it as the ability to inspire young people, as a tool for forcing our colleges, the universities to develop new curricula, as a process by which we would keep American industry going. I looked at it in a much broader sense.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have a liftoff.
May 14th, 1973. The empty SkyLab is launched. Astronauts will follow once it reaches orbit. Its budget may be limited, but SkyLab's plans are ambitious. The first astronaut crew will live in SkyLab for a month, studying the sun, the Earth, and most of all, the human body. No one knows if humans can remain healthy in space for months at a time. The launch looks good. The empty SkyLab reaches orbit. The astronauts, Pete Conrad, Paul Weitz, and Dr. Joe Kerwin, are ready to follow. Then, a problem. Controller John Aaron in the second row is monitoring SkyLab's power and temperatures. His data shows SkyLab has almost no electricity, and it's getting dangerously hot.
Inside the vehicle, it got up to 150, 160 degrees. It's in danger of melting such that the pressure will cause it to split and go apart. A rupture.
Suddenly we were facing a damaged SkyLab, and we didn't know what the problem was. It was obvious that we were not going to launch the next day, and we had serious problems to work on.
The astronauts will stay on the ground while Mission Control works the problem. The overheating is caused by a missing sun shield which tore off during launch. Without it, SkyLab is baking. The same accident tears off of one of SkyLab's main solar panels. Debris pins down the other, leaving it with almost no solar power. To keep SkyLab from melting, Mission Control will have to tilt it away from the sun. But To get even a trickle of power from the one trapped solar wing, they have to tilt it toward the sun.
And it was this constant battle between these two extremes that we had to solve and fight and get a handle on.
Battling between the extremes of too much and too little sun will take incredibly precise maneuvering. That job, controlling the vehicle's course and attitude, is normally up to the orbital mechanics and mission control's front row, nicknamed the trench.
In the trench, we're dealing with radar tracking data, guidance systems, software, things like concepts. We dealt not with hardware.
That hardware, SkyLab's computers, instruments, power systems, is the responsibility of the second row, systems. Both rows report to the flight director in the third row, the one in charge. The trench begins trying to maneuver SkyLab and quickly hits a snag. As SkyLab turns away from the sun, they lose their tracking data.
Temperatures by the various sensors.
The only way to know its position is for John Aaron, call sign Ecom, to guesstimate based on his temperature and power readings.
Normally, since I was a system engineer, I didn't have anything to do with controlling the attitude of the vehicle. I mean, that was what the trench did. Well, as soon as we pointed off the sun, the trench didn't know where the vehicle was.
The solution is something completely unheard of. Ecom begins controlling SkyLab's position.
And so we'd tell flight, pitch us up 15 more degrees, and we need to roll left 12. We'd call out those orders. The guidance officer would kind of look at us and say, okay, and send the commands up.
86 degrees, max elevation.
The degree of improvisation was incredible. We innovated solutions that were so far out in left field that it was a leap of faith for one controller to trust another one that they knew what they were doing.
And that was a cultural shock to the trench when Ecom started guiding the vehicle. And I'll never forget, I believe it was the guidance officer who stood up. He looked up, come up with the console, and he says, Ecom, tell me something. Do you know what the hell you're doing? I said, just compute the commands and send them up. We'll be all right.
It's not elegant, but it works. Over the next 2 weeks, by trial and error, Mission Control is able to keep SkyLab's power alive without letting it get too hot.
Flight controllers, Ecom reports everything looks fine.
But there's only so much they can do from the ground. If they can't get astronauts up there to free the trapped solar wing, American manned spaceflight is finished.
And if we couldn't do this, the entire program would end. SkyLab was over.
May 1973. Working around the clock, Mission Control has managed to keep SkyLab alive for nearly 2 weeks. Now, it will be up to astronauts Pete Conrad, Paul Weitz, and Joe Kerwin to go on site and perform emergency repairs.
3, 2, 1, 0. And we have a liftoff.
SkyLab was one of the greatest challenges we faced. If we did not salvage that mission, America's near-term role in space would cease to exist.
Callie, all in the SkyLab. Copy. Hard docking.
Once the astronauts get inside, they attack SkyLab's first problem, overheating, by deploying an umbrella-like sunshade. It doesn't look like much, but this improvised solution makes all the difference. Temperatures in SkyLab immediately begin to drop. But it still has almost no power. They have to free the stuck solar panel or SkyLab's batteries will die in a few weeks. To do that, the astronauts will have to go outside and somehow, from 20 feet away, cut a small metal strap that is holding the panel down. After scouring the country, NASA has equipped the astronauts with a highly sophisticated engineering solution. The perfect tool for the job. A telephone company tree trimmer.
It was operated by 2 ropes, and by pulling on the ropes, after placing the jaws over the tree branch, pull it closed, and you'd cut the branch. So that's about what we had.
June 7th, 1973. Pete Conrad and Joe Kerwin begin their spacewalk, what NASA calls extravehicular activity, or EVA.
Okay, Houston, we have the debris in sight. There looks like enough room to get the cutter, and I'm trying to help Joe stabilize.
Kerwin tries to extend the pole and position the jaws of the tree trimmer around the metal strap. But in weightlessness, it's not so easy.
Every time I would move to get the jaws close to the strap, my body would move in reaction. Newton's third law of motion took over, and Pete didn't have enough leverage to hold me in place.
I can't stabilize myself on this side. I just can't do it.
It's not looking good, and there's nothing Mission Control can do to help. Then the astronauts notice a nearby U-bolt on the outside of SkyLab.
What if we run the tether from my suit to that U-bolt and tighten it enough so that when I push my feet up, I've got a 3-point stance? Aha! And man, I was suddenly as stable as if I was sitting here. And 5 minutes later, we had the jaws on the strap.
Now, the moment of truth. Kerwin cuts the strap. Nothing happens.
And we exerted pressure and exerted pressure.
Suddenly, the massive panel releases and starts extending.
There was this sudden release, and the 2 of us went ass over tea kettle into outer space.
Only their safety tethers keep them from disappearing into the void.
Joe Kerwin's heart rate did reach a high of 150.
We pulled ourselves back to the surface of the workshop, turned around, and saw the most beautiful sight of the mission. That solar panel cover fully up, and the panels were already starting to come out.
Hey, way to go.
Mission Control and the astronauts have saved SkyLab.
I think the SkyLab repair effort was equivalent to the Apollo 13 effort, if not even greater.
Yet, many Americans barely notice. 6 weeks earlier, the last U.S. combat troops and American POWs were leaving Vietnam. And 4 days into SkyLab, the Senate Watergate Committee was beginning nationally televised hearings. Out of the public spotlight, Mission Control now gets down to the business of running a space station for months at a time. They're used to doing short, intense missions to the moon. SkyLab is different. It doesn't go anywhere. It just orbits. And orbits. And orbits.
What a contrast between the initial weeks of salvage intensity to the humdrum of the routine.
This is just go round and around and around and around.
Around and around and around, and tomorrow it would be around, and all in the same orbit.
It wasn't some challenging and interesting thing to come out here and bore holes in space.
They just sat there and they'd watch the spacecraft go around and around and around.
Week after week after week, gee, do I really want to do this the rest of my life?
The boredom may be new, but long hours and being cut off from the outside world have been going on for years, and controllers aren't the only ones feeling the effects. To get America to the moon, controllers' wives and children have made sacrifices of their own.
It was almost like Mom was a single parent. So we just, we just lived with the fact that, well, Daddy was never home. He was always at work, always at work.
We owe them something that I don't think we've ever really recognized. The wives just had to take care of the house, the kids, and whatever business, home business you had going.
His console was called Control. And I can remember occasionally we would be sitting at the dinner table after he had been simming all day, and he just kind of comes in and sits down, and we'd say, "Oh, Daddy, I need such and such," or "Daddy, can we go?" And he would just not even hear us. And so finally we say, "Control, I need to go to such," and it was like, oh, someone call my name.
There was a lot of Little League games I didn't get to make. We all just felt like we had to get it done, and the families took the raw end of that.
We started to lose people. And when you got all done with SkyLab, there was only a core of a lot of the people that were here in Apollo that were left.
SkyLab Houston, your go for undocking.
In February 1974, the third crew leaves SkyLab. In 9 months, astronauts have performed over 3,000 hours of scientific experiments and returned huge amounts of data, including 4,000 photos of the Earth, 127,000 of the Sun. And they've proven humans can remain healthy and productive in space for months at a time.
I think that the measurement of the human body response to long-duration flight was probably done better in SkyLab than anything before or since.
We were given the job basically of preparing the United States to build a permanent space station. We said, we think we've done that.
Gene Kranz would like to keep SkyLab going.
We left it in a condition where we believed we could return to it later. We had the potential for doing that.
But SkyLab's potential will soon be overshadowed by geopolitics. And the engineers will find themselves forced to work their next mission with their oldest enemy. Spring 1974. SkyLab's third crew has returned to Earth. America's first space station, now empty, continues to orbit. There's one more Apollo spacecraft left. Gene Kranz would like to see it used to send another crew to SkyLab.
Basically, in the first mission, it was 1 month and then followed by a 2-month mission, followed by a 3-month mission. I would have liked to seen a 6-month or a year-long mission. We had the potential for doing that. SkyLab was fully operable.
But politics intervenes. American and Russian leaders are planning the world's first international spaceflight. The Apollo-Soyuz Test Project, ASTP, calls for an American Apollo spacecraft to rendezvous and dock with a Russian Soyuz capsule. Its larger purpose is symbolic. To prove that after decades of Cold War hostility, two enemy superpowers can put aside differences and work together in space. To make it happen, American controllers will have to work hand in hand with their oldest enemy, in the heart of the evil empire. Heading up the American team is former flight director Glenn Lunny.
We had been involved in this Cold War competition with the Soviet Union for all my adult life.
And I had all the images and impressions that were current in America at the time. A cold, forbidding kind of a place, threatening, intimidating.
If the Americans are a bit nervous, the Russians are downright paranoid.
KGB was always present. We were monitored in our hotel. We were monitored in the little cafeteria at the control center. I mean, if you wished for something, you just had to say it out loud, and it usually would show up. Somebody made a comment, I don't understand why they don't serve water with their meals here at the table. And the next day, there was a beautiful hand-painted picture on the table with water.
Surveillance notwithstanding, Soviet officials make certain their American guests are exposed to Russian culture.
The Russians would plan something for us. Usually it was going to a church somewhere in Moscow with all these icons.
When Russians come to the U.S., Americans return the hospitality. Only the icons are a little different.
We took them one weekend up to the Huntsville Prison Rodeo. The prisoners in their striped suits are riding horses. On the way up, we stopped at a Kentucky Fried Chicken place, and everybody ordered a fried chicken basket.
July 1975. 18 years after Sputnik, two superpowers launched two crews.
We have a liftoff. All engines building up thrust.
Days later, on July 17th, a Soviet and American spacecraft dock in space.
Capture. We also have capture.
The hatches open, and enemies that competed in a space race lasting over a decade shake hands.
Glad to see you. Here. Gentlemen, I'm confident that the day is not far off when space missions made possible
by this first joint effort will be more or less commonplace.
I think the Apollo-Soyuz experience was the basis on which maybe we could find a way to ameliorate some of what had been since World War II almost, a long-standing confrontation.
Of the two countries, by the managers and engineers and all the work.
But from an engineering perspective, take the flags off the spacecraft, and Apollo-Soyuz is simply another rendezvous and docking, something both countries had perfected years earlier.
The Apollo-Soyuz was a unique experiment in political science. It certainly was not a unique experience in spaceflight. I don't think that from a spaceflight point of view, we or the Russians learned a great deal.
How comfortable do you consider the Apollo spacecraft to be, and how do you like the American food?
While public attention is focused on diplomacy in space, in a different part of the sky, nearly forgotten, the empty SkyLab is still there, still circling. But America cannot return to SkyLab. There are no more rockets. The decision to use the last Apollo rocket for Apollo-Soyuz means SkyLab has effectively been abandoned.
Abandoning SkyLab, to some extent, was like abandoning the moon. We had derived immense benefit from the work that we had done, and again, we abandoned this.
3 years after leaving the moon, America's manned space program is grounded, waiting for a new launch vehicle, the Space Shuttle, that is still years away.
That was about as low a moment as we've had. We weren't flying. We weren't flying, and the shuttle was out in front of us, but we weren't sure how far out, and it was a low point in the agency.
The future shuttle's engines, heat protective tiles, computers will all be revolutionary new designs, all unproven. Until they're built, tested, and perfected, American manned spaceflight is over.
Abort. Commence explosion at the test pad.
1981. The last Apollo rockets have been retired for lack of funding. With no vehicle to fly, Americans haven't been in space for 6 years. The replacement for those rockets is the Space Shuttle, officially called Space Transportation System, STS, a reusable spacecraft with wings. It will launch like a rocket and land like an airplane. Its job is to carry not just people, but large cargo in a giant 60-foot bay.
The size was just overwhelming. They had a full-scale wooden mock-up of the orbiter, and they called it the Messiah, because anytime anybody came into the room, they'd look and go, Jesus Christ.
To get this enormous vehicle into space and back again will require a host of technological breakthroughs. Engines must withstand a controlled explosion for 8 minutes, and unlike previous rockets, shuttle engines must be reusable. When the shuttle returns at 5 miles per second and hits the atmosphere, it will heat up to 3,000 degrees. Protection from that heat comes from 33,000 silica tiles, each individually shaped and numbered. The problem is gluing them on. Losing even one tile or opening a gap between tiles could be fatal.
If we had lost one of these thermal tiles in the wrong location, we'd have a burn through. We'd lose the spacecraft.
Returning to Earth at 25 times the speed of sound, the shuttle will be flown by 5 redundant computers. It's the world's first digital flight control system, and it better not freeze up.
You know, you can't do Control-Alt-Delete right in the middle of flight and reboot the thing. It's got to work continuously, and it's got to work right every time and be right, because the space shuttle is not a vehicle you can manually fly during entry.
Landing will also be new. The shuttle will glide back to Earth with no engines. That means there's no second chance to find the runway. The trench's calculations have to be perfect.
You know, if we landed within a mile of a ship in Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, that was a huge success. Well, that wouldn't work with the space shuttle. You have to hit the runway because you don't have go-around capability. If you miss the first landing, that's a real bad day.
April 12, 1981. STS-1, the first flight of the new shuttle Columbia. After nearly 10 years of development, the engines, the tiles, the computers, the runway landing, all are about to be put to the ultimate test.
If any part of this system failed, the total system failed. So the entire United States space program was riding on this first shuttle launch.
Astronauts John Young and Bob Crippen are going to ride the first reusable spacecraft in history. Sitting in the second row, working guidance, navigation, and control, GNC, is rookie controller Rick Fitz. STS-1 will be his first launch.
The anxiety level among all the team members was very high. None of us admitted that we were all the steely-eyed missile men who showed very little emotion but every one of us was scared to death.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine.
They get a status, Fido. Go. Booster, go. Easy. Go. Eagle, go. Go at 40, Capcom. Columbia, Houston, you're going 40.
High risk is always going to be the launch phase. You really don't have an escape system with the shuttle. And when the solid rockets ignite liftoff for about 2 minutes, you can't shut them down. You're going to go.
2 minutes until the solid rocket boosters burn out and separate. 2 minutes with no abort options.
Roger, Columbia, on the nice ride. You're lofting a little bit, so you'll probably be slightly high in staging. Columbia, you're negative C.
The moment everyone's waiting for is solid rocket booster separation, SRB SEP.
Columbia, your goal for SRB step. Roger on the SEP, Columbia.
After SRB SEP, I got really emotional. I felt like I'd just won a gold medal at the Olympics and they were playing the Star-Spangled Banner.
Let's go. Yes, down, let's go.
The main engines will burn for 6 more minutes. The empty external tank drops away, and finally, the shuttle Columbia is safely in orbit.
Columbia, Houston, you guys did so good, we're going to let you stay up there for a couple of days. Your goal for on orbit.
After 6 years on the ground, America is back in space. Astronauts Young and Crippen will remain in orbit for 2 days, checking out the shuttle systems. On-orbit flight director Chuck Lewis comes on shift. One of his first items is a live TV transmission from the shuttle.
When the TV came on in the room, real-time TV came on, there was that shot of the tail section.
Mods here. We're trying to put that on TV right now.
Roger, we're looking at out the forward camera.
Basically, what appears to be 3 tile and some smaller pieces.
There were 2 or 3 tiles
Roger, Grip, we can see that.
on the OMS pod that were missing. And I thought to myself, oh crap.
April 14th, 1981. Astronauts John Young and Bob Crippen on Shuttle Columbia are about to return to Earth. Video has revealed missing thermal tiles, the only protection against the 3,000-degree heat of re-entry.
John and Chris, we're 30 seconds from LOS.
Re-entry begins. No one knows what will happen.
You've got G-forces, even though you've done the testing, you're still worried that something might go wrong. And then you go into blackout, and pretty soon the radio's out.
During what's called blackout, the heat of re-entry cuts off radio contact for 20 minutes. Will the tiles hold?
The fear is that having a gap where a tile used to be would lead to stripping a row of tiles, and you needed every one of them if you wanted to enter successfully.
Mission Control won't know the outcome until blackout ends.
You get to 0, you start calling, the Capcom calls the crew, you wait for a response, and everybody's got their fingers crossed.
Columbia, Houston.
Hello there, Houston. Columbia's here.
Hello, Columbia, Houston's here. How do you read?
Flying clear, and we're doing...
The tiles have held. Now Columbia must glide nearly 4,000 miles to the exact location of the runway at Edwards Air Force Base. Trench's calculations better be right.
How do you make sure you don't run short of energy because you have this glider that's coming back down to a runway from a third of the world away, and you got to hit that 15,000-foot runway, and if you don't hit it, there's no chance of going around. You're going to crash and burn.
Flight Fighter, I look exactly nominal. Okay, nominal energy, nominal ground track.
Columbia, you got perfect energy, perfect ground track.
Roger that. Show him crossing the coastline.
Columbia, we show you crossing the coast now.
Roger that.
Once the runway's in sight, the flight director gives controllers an unexpected command: how to deal with the one thing they don't rehearse: human emotion.
Okay, and all personnel in the Mocha, I'm sure every one of us following landing is going to have a certain degree of exhilaration. So as the nose wheel touches down, you have 15 seconds to vent that emotion. And then I will expect this room to become quiet and keep it that way for another 45 minutes. Okay? Keep an eye on the DLAS. GPS, everything looking okay to you?
Affirmative, flight.
GNC, that's good. Flight Eagle, looking good. Pick up. Go. 3. Room, get ready for exhilaration.
4. 3. Touchdown.
Welcome home, Columbia. Beautiful, beautiful.
Flight recorders to stop.
To see that everything did work as planned, it was just a total rush.
To me, the payoff was seeing John Young and Kripp get out of that spacecraft and then just go jumping around examining the aircraft. I mean, it was an absolute joy.
It was a hell of a technical achievement, and one that we've been working on for a long, long time. It was pretty emotional.
After 6 years stuck on the ground, America is finally back in space. The shuttle begins revolutionizing spaceflight. A fleet of 4 orbiters will carry satellites to orbit, conduct science experiments, repair broken satellites, and for the first time in history, bring large cargo back from space. The shuttle also revolutionizes the sociology of space. Astronauts will no longer be just military test pilots. Some mission specialists will be responsible not for flying the vehicle, but for tending to payloads and experiments. On the ground, the shuttle changes mission control as well, bringing a new wave of engineers into the control center. Unlike Gene Kranz's pioneering generation, these young controllers won't be starting from scratch.
I was aware of mission control from the get-go, like everybody else. My older brother and I first learned to count backwards from 10 to 0, which is absolutely true. And I'm sure we drove our folks nuts because we used to count down to everything. Time to get in the car, time to go take a bath.
This is going to sound absolutely ridiculous, but I very much wanted to be a Starfleet officer. And I think the closest to that profession in this century is actually mission controller.
I read every newspaper article, every Life magazine article I could find. And it's funny because I remember a lot of the names and reading the reports of the press conferences. Flight Director Gene Kranz said thus and such at the interview. And I have to say, as much as I admire and respect the astronauts, being in mission control was the place to be.
For new controllers, there's a lot to master. Schematics, lights, switches. But they're not the only ones that have to adjust. The world outside the control center has been changing, and the new engineers bring with them signs of the times.
There was a little culture clash with the new guys coming in and the little bit longer hair. You've seen the pictures of the guys on Apollo 11, Apollo 13, all the white shirts, the skinny ties. There were just a few of us that came in the 70s that didn't quite fit that mold.
Evolving fashions and hairstyles are just the beginning. Older engineers are about to find out the mold for controllers isn't just changing, it's being shattered.
I'll never forget going into a mission rules review. And this young lady got up and she was arguing the mission rule. And I thought, she sounds like a flight controller. She was taking the flight controller view of everything. Finally, I punched Carl. I said, Carl, is she a flight controller? And he said, yeah. And I looked back at her, you know, and I thought, well, I'll be.
My desk was aimed at the window, so my back was to the door, and I'd look around, and there would be some of the men looking around the doorway, and they'd go, is that one of them? Meaning a female engineer.
When I came here, there weren't in flight control very many women at all. It was the only one, and I believe the first one in the section, propulsion section.
Well, the first thing, they had to put women's rooms in this building. And they did it so subtly, the first day they did, I walked into one.
Hey, what are you doing?
The changes in mission control are echoed in the astronaut corps as well. In June 1983, Sally Ride becomes the first American woman to fly into space.
We have liftoff. Liftoff.
In August, Guyan Bluford, the first African American. As shuttle flights continue, the most complex flying machine ever built is proving its potential. The shuttle is so consistently successful that spaceflight is beginning to seem routine and safe.
I always felt in the shuttle that we had arrived kind of where commercial aviation arrived, that it was now time that we were going to put a pilot in the front that didn't have a parachute and passengers in the back that didn't have a parachute, and you're going to trust the system to work.
In June 1984, NASA announces the Teacher in Space program. For the first time, an ordinary citizen will get a ride in space.
Well, I am so excited to be here. We watched Columbia.
New Hampshire teacher Krista McAuliffe will fly the second orbiter to join the shuttle fleet, Challenger. January 28, 1986. After several postponements, Challenger is go for launch.
We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1.
January 28, 1986. Space Shuttle Challenger is a few hours away from launch. Weather has been unusually cold. Unknown to Mission Control, at Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama and Morton Thiokol, builder of the solid rocket boosters, some engineers are concerned. They fear the cold may cause O-ring seals in the SRB joints to fail. But there's no hard evidence. They decide to go ahead with the launch.
Pilot Mike Smith, followed by Krista McAuliffe, Teacher in Space.
Get him up on this loop, please.
Flight Director Jay Green, an Apollo veteran, starts his shift.
I came in and took over, and I never thought that there was a concern anywhere at the Marshall Systems level. We have an ICE team. They cleared us for launch. Countdown was nominal. Hardware looked good. Everything looked golden.
4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff.
No one realizes it, But at the moment of ignition, both O-rings in the right SRB fail. A puff of black smoke, later seen on high-speed film, reveals hot combustion gases blowing through the seam.
Roger, roll, Challenger.
We launched. Everything looked good.
Good roll, Floyd. Raj, good roll.
The SRBs will burn for 2 minutes. Gene Krantz, now Director of Mission Operations, is sitting in the 4th row.
Mentally now, my clock is running because after 2 minutes, the mission control team and the astronauts start to have escape options. But prior to that time, there is no escape.
Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%.
The leak in the SRB joint is getting worse. At 58 seconds, a small flame breaks through.
We got to the throttle down, throttle up call.
We'll throttle down to 65%.
And I was now seconds away from feeling this burden being released from you.
64 seconds. The flame no one sees begins burning through the skin of the external fuel tank holding liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen for the main engines.
3 at 65.
65, Fido.
TDL confirms throttles.
Thank you.
Still looking good. Engines came up.
The Capcom responded, "Your go at throttle up."
Challenger, go at throttle up. Challenger, go at throttle up.
There was a TV about right over there. And we've been trained, watch the data, don't watch the TV.
I saw just a flicker of light, and I glanced over there momentarily.
It was out of my line of sight. These guys picked it up.
And it was horror.
Go ahead. Flight GC, we've had negative contact, lost downlink.
Copy. Okay, all operators, watch your data carefully.
And I look over, just see their faces. And then I looked over there at the TV, and there was the smoke column y'all have seen as much as we have.
I looked at Jay, and the look on his face was something that you see only a few times in your life.
Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction. Flight Fido. Go ahead. RSO reports vehicle exploded.
Copy. Fido, can we get any reports from recovery forces?
Stand by.
Dismay, horror, pain. Just wonder if you could do something, could have done something to have forestalled it.
And this horror, grips you. It becomes almost unimaginable in your ability to live with it. But that is our job, to live with the risk of our business, and some days it's bad. This is the nature of people who hold lives in their hands.
All of the 7-person crew are gone. 6 astronauts and New Hampshire schoolteacher Krista McAuliffe. As the disaster replays over and over on television, Mission Control is already taking the first step to learn what happened.
Okay, everybody, stay off the telephones. Make sure you maintain all your data. Start pulling it together.
And it was data collection, preservation of data. And then it was sneak out of the building.
For controllers, perhaps the hardest part of Challenger is their powerlessness.
We come together today to mourn the loss of 7 brave Americans, to share the grief.
Over time, through the simulations, we train ourselves that there is nothing that can happen that we can't solve. And if a problem comes up that will affect the shuttle or the safety of the crew, the lives of the crew, we will fix that. And here was a case in Challenger where a problem happened that we could not fix.
Several investigations follow. The report of a presidential commission, released 4 months after the accident in June 1986, faults NASA for ignoring years of warning signs that the O-rings in the SRB joint were not reliable. For the next 2.5 years, America's space program is grounded while the SRB joint is redesigned. Some critics urge an end to manned spaceflight. But mission controllers remain convinced that the benefits outweigh the risk.
I think we all recognized the importance of recovering from that accident, resolving the problems, and moving on. There's a great deal of courage in the people here in this program. We don't do this because of the laurels from the public, which have faded since the Apollo days. We do this because of a belief in what we do.
This is the process of adventurers. This is the process of exploration. This is the process of people who are willing to accept risk. We felt it essential to provide the inspiration for the students in our colleges and universities to develop the technologies we needed for the future. We felt it essential to our nation to remain explorers.
September 29, 1988. 2.5 years after the Challenger disaster, the shuttle Discovery returns to flight, beginning a 5-year period of shuttle successes. Over the next 32 missions, shuttles release communications and defense satellites, carry out science experiments, launch probes to Venus, Jupiter, and the Sun. Milestone after milestone, success after success. But when the $1.5 billion Hubble Space Telescope is found to be defective, NASA once again finds itself under criticism. The Hubble is supposed to deliver views of the universe with unprecedented clarity. Instead, because of a flaw in its mirror, the images it sends back are out of focus, useless. NASA begins planning a daring mission to service and repair the Hubble. But no one is certain they can pull it off. Lead flight director will be Milt Heflin, and Heflin is feeling the pressure.
NASA was taking lots of heat. The servicing mission was the next act on stage. And yes, there was a tremendous amount of nervousness. Well, okay, NASA, are you gonna fix it? Can you do it?
December 2nd, 1993. The shuttle Endeavour departs for the Hubble. It's not clear if the repair is even possible, but it is clear NASA's future is once again on the line. December the 2nd, 1993. The shuttle Endeavour is on a mission to repair the $1.5 billion Hubble Space Telescope. The stakes are high. Not only the Hubble, but the future of NASA itself may well be riding on the outcome.
We had deployed what was to be the crown jewel of astronomy and we had an aberration in the lens that would not produce the detail that basically had been advertised. So there was incredible pressure upon NASA.
It will be one of the most difficult and complicated missions ever attempted. The Hubble is 5 stories tall, the size of a small office building, moving 17,000 miles an hour, 370 miles above the Earth. Installing a corrective lens is only part of the job. Lead flight director for the mission is Milt Heflin.
We also had solar arrays that needed to be replaced. This is basically ripping the wings off of this telescope and putting new ones on. We also had some rate gyros that failed, had to be replaced, some power distribution hardware, so we had plenty of work to do.
It will take 5 days of back-to-back EVAs, 35 hours of spacewalks. Never before have astronauts attempted this much work out in space. Every minute is planned and choreographed. They won't have a second to waste.
Keep an eye on the doors.
Okay, I'll study the door, Jeff. I have the door. Let me go put this on the telescope first.
The first EVA starts well. In 2 hours, astronaut Story Musgrave manages to replace the defective gyros.
Not to get you spun up, but we have 6 good gyros on the telescope.
There we go.
Then, a problem.
It's not closing. The doors aren't closing right. I'm trying to get the bottom.
Access doors to the gyros won't close. Heflin doesn't want a setback on the very first EVA.
This was going to be a race for several days, and it was important that we got out of the starting blocks and got to that first turn ahead of the game.
Astronaut Musgrave suggests using a tool called a come-along to force the doors shut. But engineers on the ground disagree. They're nervous about damage.
Flight payload. They're concerned. They believe what he wants to do might damage the door hinge.
Milt Heflin has scores of Hubble experts on the ground giving him one opinion, an astronaut in space giving him another, and no way to know who's right.
Troy thinks about 5 psi would do the trick.
All the analysts look at data, but you get to the flight director, and he or she has very little real data that they look at. Their data source are all these people in the front room that report status and information to them.
It is a scary proposition to sit on console as a flight director and realize I'm going to make the decisions, and recognize that in many cases we will not have enough data to know that we're making the right decision. And even in that case, you still have to make a decision and take some action.
There's gray, and the flight director's job is to take that gray and then use his judgment as to whether you're either go or no go, and you have to live with this decision.
Flight payload. We're concerned about what kind of...
Everyone waits for Heflin's call.
Copy that. Capcom, your story to go ahead.
He decides to let Musgrave try it.
I had a great deal of trust in Story Musgrave. He treated that Hubble Space Telescope like a child. Let's trust what Story wants to do. Let's let him go do that.
No, don't do it yet. Okay. The bottom is engaged. All right, I think we got the door closed.
Good work, guys.
Heflin's decision to take the risk has been critical.
We're ahead. We made that first turn and we are in the lead.
Over the next 4 days of high-pressure spacewalks, astronauts discard the old solar arrays and deploy new ones. They replace the wide-field planetary camera, and they install COSTAR, the corrective lens that will refocus the light from Hubble's flawed mirror. Finally, they jettison Hubble, releasing it into its own orbit and return to Earth. Now the world waits to see if the repair will work. A week later, the answer. As Hubble starts returning its first clear pictures, breathtaking views of our universe emerge. Over the years that follow, the Hubble's images, magnificent, mysterious, spiritual, strike a chord with people everywhere.
When I see the Hubble photos, I recognize how vast this universe is, how finite we are, and how infinite this world is around us.
My goodness gracious, would you look at what is there? I mean, we on Earth are arrogant enough to think that we're it. You know, that's it. Hubble, I think, is making a statement saying that you're not it.
While the Hubble repair mission is a new beginning for the Space Telescope, it marks the end of an era in mission control. The last time Gene Kranz sits at a console in this room.
Coming into the control room that day was the beginning of not being part of this process. So that was the sad part, but the good part was, when I left that room that day, I saw the culture that had been established within this room. I saw the legacy of leadership. I saw the legacy of people willing to step up to risk, make decisions, and then get on with it. And now it's time to hand over fully and completely to this next generation. And I felt good. I felt this is what I was here for.
As Gene Kranz leaves for the last time, the institution he helped build is on the verge of radical change. The young generation of engineers is about to face challenges and crises as demanding as any in the history of mission control.
Columbia, Houston, you are go for re-entry.
December 1993. As Gene Kranz leaves mission control for the last time, NASA is on the brink of a new era. Joining with Russia, as well as Japan, Canada, and Europe, to build ISS, the International Space Station.
The space station is a massive venture. There has never been a construction project of this magnitude ever attempted in space in the history of mankind on this planet.
ISS will consist of multiple modules built on Earth, assembled together in space. To fly this new vehicle for years at a time, Mission Control will have to expand.
Our mission was changing to some degree. We now had to simultaneously control shuttle missions and station missions. And the physical architecture of the systems in this building just didn't support doing that. So we had to upgrade to a newer capability.
The old Houston Control Center, in use since 1965, will be retired. A new addition is built to hold 3 new flight control rooms, FCRs or FICRs, 2 for shuttle and 1 for ISS. When put into operation in 1995, the combined processing power and backup capacity makes the new Mission Control Center one of the most advanced computer networks in the world. 3 years later, in November 1998, the first ISS module is launched. Over the next 2 years, 11 others are added. Each is built by different nations and contractors, yet in space, they must fit and work together perfectly.
As far as a technical accomplishment, it probably far surpasses anything we've done before.
In November 2000, the first crew, Expedition 1, begins living aboard the International Space Station. For mission controllers, flying ISS is a new experience. On the shuttle, astronauts control much of the vehicle's operations, but operating the station is largely up to mission control. Station controller Holly Ridings will never forget sending her first command.
You know, I get to send commands to a vehicle, you know, several hundred nautical miles up in space going around the Earth every 90 minutes. I mean, that is just amazing. And all I did at the time was turn on a heater. But at the time it was, you know, I just turned on a heater and you're just completely, you know, in awe again of what you are capable of. It really was amazing.
By January 2003, ISS is on its 6th crew. The structure is nearly half complete. Shuttle flights are now devoted almost entirely to building and supporting station. But there is one more non-ISS shuttle mission left. STS-107, a science flight, to be flown by the shuttle Columbia.
7, 2, 1. We have booster ignition and liftoff of Space Shuttle Columbia with...
On January 16th, 2003, Columbia lifts off.
Research mission finally underway.
During ascent, a briefcase-sized chunk of styrofoam insulation blows off the external fuel tank and strikes the shuttle, apparently somewhere on the left side. But foam strikes are nothing new.
We've had close to 9,000 impacts on the vehicle throughout the program, and we were able to land with all of them. And I think there's only one, maybe two, that required a structural repair.
A small amount of damage on the vehicle was a maintenance issue, but that it didn't seem to threaten the survivability of the vehicle and the performance of the tile in protecting the vehicle from heat.
Columbia spends 16 days in space and carries out over 70 different science experiments. February 1st, 2003. After a perfect mission, Columbia begins re-entry. Flight director on shift is Leroy Kane.
I felt very good about the prospects of being able to land that day. I was thinking about the things that I always think about, worrying really more accurately about the things that I always worry about on entry and landing day.
Jeff Kling is on the mechanical system console, call sign Max.
It was a very typical entry sort of day until we started losing some sensors. And we lost one, which got our attention, and within seconds, a second one, and then two more.
Flight Max.
Go ahead, Max.
FYI, I've just lost 4 separate temperature transducers on the left side of the vehicle, hydraulic return temperatures.
It was not anything to be concerned with because we've had sensors go off before.
Copy. Looked to be an instrumentation problem, quite frankly.
4 high return temps. Okay, is there anything common to them?
As Jeff Kling works his problem, Katie Rogers at the ECOM console watches other temperature indicators.
Part of my responsibility are these sensors underneath the tile on the skin of the vehicle. And as I pulled up that display, I noticed that two of the temperatures were off scale low, which is sort of an unpowered state. Jeff reported some more instrumentation that he had lost. I looked back at the display and I had 2 more parameters going off scale low. I thought, well, this is unusual.
And flight ecom?
Ecom.
I've got 4 temperature sensors on the bottom line data that are off scale low.
We just couldn't come up with any single point failure that would explain all of the indications that we were seeing.
There is no commonality.
No commonality.
Something's going on that we don't understand.
Then, Mission Control loses all communication with Columbia.
Columbia, Houston, comm check.
February 1st, 2003. Space Shuttle Columbia is re-entering the Earth's atmosphere at 17,000 miles an hour. Its exterior is heating to 3,000 degrees. Some sensors have stopped sending data. It could be nothing, but it's where those sensors are located that is starting to worry Mission Control.
Something's going on that we don't understand. I was standing over here, came over next to Ron, and Ralph was sitting in that chair, and I said, Ralph, that's the left wing. And that was the wing that the phone hit.
Where is that instrumentation located?
All 4 of them are located in the aft part of the left wing.
I began to think about the fact that this was all happening in the left wing, and the fact that we had a debris strike, and probably at that point is when I began to worry about the possibility of having hot gas in the wing.
Then Mission Control loses communication with Columbia.
Columbia, Houston, comm check. Columbia, Houston, UHF, comm check.
Flight intel, I didn't expect this bad of a hit on comm.
By now, Columbia should be showing up on radar.
Fido, when are you expecting tracking?
1 minute to go, flight.
All Mission Control knows, they know through data. The one thing their screens don't show is a visual picture of the outside world. They have no idea what people are seeing in the skies over Texas until they get a phone call.
One of our colleagues from our office had called in and said they saw multiple objects in the path of where Columbia should have been. GC flight. GC flight. Fly GC. Lock the doors. Copy.
There's a lot of symbolic meaning to that GC lock the door. And when he made the call, he did it twice very quickly. GC flight, lock the doors.
You know, part of me was wanting to transition into this sort of this angry mode of, you know, by golly, we're going to find out what happened no matter what it takes. There's a whole list of data collection items that we need to make sure we log through.
Airliners carry voice and data recorders to tell what happened in the event of an accident. In spaceflight, Mission Control itself is a giant data recorder. Each controller, each console records one piece of the story. Leroy Kane has just taken the first step in what will become the Columbia accident investigation.
A massive search effort being coordinated by different government agencies has started in Central
The process that begins that day quickly zeroes in on the foam strike. Apparently, during ascent, the small piece of styrofoam damaged the leading edge of the left wing. During re-entry, super-hot gas penetrates inside the wing, which eventually breaks off, causing Columbia to disintegrate. The report of the Columbia Accident Investigation Board, released in August 2003, finds that foam strikes were tolerated for years because they never did major damage. Schedule pressure, budget constraints, and workforce reductions also contributed to a breakdown in safety. For the next 2.5 years, NASA works to improve the insulation on the external tank and develop ways to inspect and repair shuttle surfaces in space.
Brain safe systems armed, T-minus 10 seconds.
July 26, 2005.
6, 5,
Shuttle Discovery is about to return to flight.
1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Discovery.
To detect any debris strike, the launch is photographed by over 100 cameras. On the ground, mounted in chase planes, and on the vehicle itself.
That was by far the smoothest ascent through first stage that we've ever experienced.
Approaching the International Space Station, ISS, Commander Eileen Collins performs a backflip maneuver, allowing the station crew to take additional photos of Discovery's underside. Never before has anyone seen such detailed views of the vehicle in flight.
My heart's been in my throat all morning. It's been a great day, and to think that here we are today with Americans back in flight on an American vehicle is just a tremendous step.
But within days, analysis of the photography reveals the foam problem that destroyed Columbia has not been completely eliminated.
We've had a problem. That was a very large piece of foam, and that is clearly unacceptable and clearly has to go be fixed.
Discovery Houston on 290.
Thankfully, none of the foam hits on Discovery are critical, and the mission continues. Astronauts do spacewalks to repair the station and deliver 16 tons of supplies.
Station flight confirms redrift. Copy, thanks, Brian.
On the last spacewalk, astronaut Steve Robinson removes 2 pieces of loose gap filler between the tiles on Discovery's underside. It's the first in-space repair of shuttle surfaces in history.
You guys did a great job. Congratulations.
On August 9th, Discovery returns to Earth. The most closely watched shuttle mission in decades has successfully resupplied the station and tested and proven new methods for inspecting and repairing shuttle surfaces. But it has also made clear that while foam strikes have been reduced by over 80%, there is still more work to do. Nor can Discovery's flight hide the larger fact that America is still at a crossroads in space, searching for a direction, a vision we haven't had since Apollo.
Time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth.
It is time for America to take the next steps,
Today I announce a new plan to explore space and extend a human presence across our solar system.
President Bush has called for a new exploration initiative, returning to the moon and going on to Mars. But other presidents have announced similar plans that never came true.
Tonight, I am directing NASA to develop a permanently manned space station and to do it within a decade.
For the new century, a permanent lunar base, and we're going back to the moon, back to the future, and this time, back to stay.
What originally inspired Project Apollo in the 1960s was not exploration, but competition, a threat to national security. Will it take a new competitor, a fear of being overshadowed or left behind, to reinvigorate America's manned space program?
China. Watch China very carefully. If China gets very aggressive in space and they put people in orbit and then they maybe want to go on somewhere else, we'd better be ready.
If you're the technological leaders, then you're going to be the economic leaders. This nation turns out about 60,000 engineers a year. China and Japan turn out about 500,000.
The principal reason I believe we must continue to be explorers is so we can inspire the young people of our nation to study engineering, math, and science. Because without engineers, mathematicians, and scientists, we will be incapable of providing the technologies we need to keep the economic engine of our country working.
Space may also hold new sources of energy. NASA and others have already studied the possibility of putting solar collectors on the moon and microwaving energy back to Earth.
There's been studies done that says that that is feasible. Would it require major infrastructure to set up on the moon? Yes. Would it take major transportation capabilities back and forth to the moon? Yes. But it is a response to the national security implications of the depleting energy supplies in the world.
Whatever the rewards of space, 2 fatal accidents in 20 years remind us there will be risks.
It's been said many times that it's safer to do space exploration with robots. Well, it may be safer, but ultimately for human beings to get the benefit of space exploration, human beings have to go in space.
It is not going to be easy. People make the mistake of thinking that just because we've flown the space shuttle over 100 times, that it is easy. It is not easy. It will never be easy.
There is no such thing as zero risk when it goes into space. It's like a ship. The only safe place for a ship with zero risk is in the harbor. But what good is a ship if it's in the harbor? I mean, ships were made to sail.
In the end, perhaps taking the risk, venturing off our planet, is simply an inescapable part of who we are.
The technical piece of what we do is so amazing that I think people forget sometimes that one of the reasons we're doing this is the human aspect of it. I mean, why do you go to space? The answer almost always is just the search for what's out there.
It's just human nature. It's in our souls to want to go explore.
I mean, look at this country. This country exists because the Europeans got restless and they were looking for more. What else is out there? What else is over the horizon? So let's keep up that tradition. Let's keep pushing the frontier out, not just because it's there, but because that's how we find things that end up changing humanity.
The worst thing that we could do is just to walk away and quit. And if we do quit flying humans in space, then we haven't learned a thing from the Columbia accident. We need to continue. We need to continue to explore, and that's the best legacy that we can have.
One thing is certain. No matter what the vision for America's future in space, there is one group of people who will be there leading the way. The men and women of Mission Control.